Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the aspects of financial fraud and how to avoid it. About 2 weeks ago, I came across this gentleman, Matt Quamen, and he struck my interest because he says, "Hey, Jeff, I would like to share my knowledge with the SafeHouse Initiative and their audience because I have a lot to share, and I think it's really important that a lot of people overlook this particular area, and that is the area of financial fraud." And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a great way to podcast, and we can share that knowledge with our SafeHouse Initiative." So, with that, let me introduce you to Matt Quamen, who's our guest today. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey you've been on, and then kind of frame out what we're going to talk about in terms of financial fraud.
Absolutely. So my background, I started in technology about 13, 14 years ago. And that was on the, customer side, working with people on digital transformations and things that were hot in the early 2010s. Eventually made my way to security about 7, 8 years ago. I was a former boss had called me and said, "Matt, I want you to come join me at the security company." I didn't know anything about security and had no interest in it, but he talked me into it. And, within the week, I fell in love with it immediately.
What did you love about it?
Well, I grew up. My dad owned an HVAC business in a small town in Minnesota. Certainly not a critical infrastructure business or a meaningful one on the world stage, but I know it meant a hell of a lot to the small town I grew up in. One of the community businesses that pay for the Little League stadium and employing 40, 50, 60 people is, again, a small business on the world stage, but means a lot in a town of 600, 700 people. So what I fell in love with was people just like my dad with great businesses, but largely didn't think technology was that important to their business or that they needed to be worried about cyber attacks. We were in a position to help them and help them operate safely so that those types of companies don't, frankly, go out of business. Not to be too dramatic, but it does obviously happen. So immediately I got to work with people just like my dad that do a great job. Technology is certainly not their first language, and get to help them avoid financial damage from cyber attacks.
You had a term you used, avoid the snakes of financial fraud. I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase. Snakes of fraud. Talk about that a bit.
Well, yeah. I spent some time in the incident response space, and across hundreds of cases, there's really only two types of attacks out there. There's ransomware, and that's what the media talks about endlessly. I should give them some credit. They do talk a little bit about fraud, but the most significant cyber attack is financial fraud. We in the industry called it business email compromise, which to people like my dad means absolutely nothing. That's why I talk about financial fraud, because although it happens through email, sometimes through text messages or even phone calls, at least 90% is still done through email. They're just trying to steal your money. It's just fraudsters and thieves that are trying to steal your money. So the reason I use that term is just to make it relatable and help people understand, so that men and women like my dad who would normally think, why would anybody be interested in me? Well, because if you have $100,000 or $1,000 and somebody can steal it easily, especially in less privileged countries, impoverished countries, a lot of people are going to do it. So we need to be aware of this and safeguard our businesses.
So do you have some examples or stories you can share with us about this whole area?
Absolutely. So like I said, it predominantly starts through email. I'll tell you 2 cases. And first off the bat, largely people are familiar with like the Nigerian prince scam and things like that, where we all kind of, I hate to say it, but a lot of people laugh at elderly folks who fall for these. Anyone who's laughing on the other side who's listening to this should find some wood to knock on, because you are really testing fate. Those attacks are still out there. The Apple gift cards, things like that that a lot of us easily identify. The big dollar ones are much more sophisticated, and in those cases, one in particular, there's a municipality that I ended up working with. Somebody was in their emails, this municipality. They were reading all their emails for over 6 months. They waited until a big invoice was supposed to go through, to the tune of, I believe, $885,000. They made an email that looked exactly like the vendor. They had intercepted the vendor's email coming in and the PDF invoice. They made their own version, looked exactly the same. The only thing they changed was the routing and checking numbers. And then they released that email from their domain, which they used the Israeli Cyrillic alphabet to change an A to an A. Even after the incident, if I gave you 10 minutes, you wouldn't be able to find the difference. That's how good this was. So this woman in the municipality's, the city's office, she had done a really good job avoiding like 3 or 4 other attempts. But this one, the money got wired out. So it was an unfortunate situation. That money went out. We did the forensic investigation. It's been a few years now, but if memory serves, we were able to get a hold of the Secret Service in time and get that money reversed. It's a lot like a murder case. If you get moving on this in the first 48 hours, largely you can get the funds frozen or returned. If it's been more than 2 days, you're in trouble. So again, the reason we all need to be mindful is the attackers have time on their advantage. They only have to be right once. We have to be right every single time. And a lot of organizations do not have the proper protocols in to make it more difficult on the snakes of financial fraud out there.
Oh, it's interesting. You said Secret Service, because I hadn't thought about that, because everybody says contact the FBI and local law enforcement, but you just said Secret Service, which they do have a different role. Interesting.
Secret Service controls the wires and ACHs. So look up your local field office, any business owner listening, any financial institution listening, look up the Secret Service field office in your area and get a relationship with them. They are the ones who control those. Now, in theory, the FBI is going to work with the Secret Service, or local law enforcement will bring in the FBI, who will bring in Secret Service. But again, first 48 hours, you need to get moving on this today if you've lost money. And you need to get in touch with the Secret Service directly. They've also been fantastic to work with in my experience, and have done a really good job helping people get those funds back.
And we've talked to a lot of people talking about incident response, but that's the first time I've heard Secret Service. So update your plans, folks that are listening to this podcast. That's a great catch, Matt.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So you have any more stories you can share with us to kind of add some more color and light, and then we can talk maybe about how you go about, tightening up the ship, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll bring any light, but I can add some more color. So another case that comes to mind, a gentleman had cancer and was getting chemotherapy. He got an email on his phone that again looked legit. He clicked on it, and that compromised his account. So the attackers used his account to contact his biggest customer. and his biggest customer wired. This was a 1 or 2 person, small, awesome American business, but very small. And they wired, or they ACH'd about $40,000, which again doesn't sound like much to some listeners, but 40,000 was his profit from the year before. So it was a meaningful dollar amount to him. And while he was getting chemo, this money had gone out the door. Also, to your point, Jeff, there's a lot of people who don't know how to help them. So it took some time for him to get connected with me at the time and try to get that money back. I don't recall if we got the money back. It's been 3 or 4 years now, but I just remember how horrible that was to go through even for me listening to it. So I can't imagine for him personally. So again, the email compromise can happen super easily in a bunch of different ways, and we need to have processes built in to avoid that happening.
Processes including what, education? Was that one of the first things you do, is to educate especially a small business? I would think that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. We're in favor of education. Just to go to the real beginning. When people, this is probably again going to be something that's not commonly said in the industry, but when people ask me what's the most important thing to do as a business owner to protect against cybercrime, largely they're thinking about ransomware and things of that nature. So I always shock them with my response. My response is always, where do you bank? That's the most important question for your likelihood of losing money in this situation. You need to be with a financial institution that you have a relationship with, that you can go in there and set up these offline solutions to fight these business email compromises. What do I mean by that? Have a relationship with someone at a bank, at a regional financial institution that Jeff's going to come in, he's going to talk to me, and Jeff's going to open his LLC or roll over his business account with me. And we're going to set up processes that make this very difficult. Number one, for over 90% of American businesses, you do not need to have international wires on. Let's turn that off. Let's set up your other wires. Largely, a lot of our customers don't need wires at all. So the way Microsoft email comes and it's opened by default, bank accounts are the same way. So if you have this relationship with an institution where you can go in and you have a VP or somebody like that you're sitting down with who turns off ACHs, turns off all your wires, and certainly all your international wires, then you talk about ACHs. How do we receive money from our clients? When I'm receiving money from a client, I know that number is going to get out there, right? That checking and routing, it's going to be in people's emails. It's going to be in people's financial systems. So that number is going to be out there. Set up a secondary account where you can transfer the money internally, because the account that I know the numbers are out there, I want that to only be able to receive money. I don't want to be able to send money from that same account. Have separate accounts where the money will sit, where you pay bills from, and those numbers should never be shared with anyone. And then you can also set up a couple different processes where if Jeff has a business partner, Jeff has to log into our portal, which is secured by a strong password and multi-factor authentication, and then Jeff can originate an ACH to have money go out. Then,
with limits, maybe.
With limits.
With limits, okay.
With limits. And at that point, the money doesn't leave yet. Now your business partner, let's call him Alan. Alan has to go in, and Alan has his own unique password, his own MFA token, and Alan has to go in and approve that ACH. Then it goes out the door. It puts 4 steps into what is in some cases a 1-step process that are much harder to engineer offline. Banks and credit unions will also have callback features. So Jeff can say any dollar amount over, and to go back to the cases I've worked, this number is different for everyone. For some people, it's $1,000. For some, it's 10. For some, it's, $100,000. But whatever the number is, if you're working with the right financial institution, the right bank or credit union, you can have them call you whenever there is an amount going out the door that's over $10,000.
Yeah.
And they have your cell phone. It can't be intercepted. It can't be redirected based on email. And you can work with them like that to add another tier to the workflow that's again offline, out of band communication, and very difficult to deal with.
It's I love your two accounts. One to receive and then one to pay bills out of. I hadn't thought something that simple.
Yep, you can also set up lockbox savings accounts. So let's say Jeff's making too darn much money. You only need 40 grand for the next 4 months of paying your bills, but you've had a great year and you've got 800,000 sitting there. Bad idea to have that sitting in the same account that's liquid that can go out the door at any second. Put that into some kind of long-term savings. You could even buy a short-term CD with that.
Yeah.
Make interest as a business and put it in something that's harder to get to. In that instance, I may even, if I'm in your shoes, Jeff, using this hypothetical, I would put it into some kind of high yield savings account or CD that cannot be touched unless Jeff comes in to that branch of the credit union or the bank.
Yeah.
So that money is, well, it can't be digitally sent by anyone, including yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, your relationship with your banker is something I haven't heard discussed, because that makes all the sense in the world. That good relationship that you set up, the how you operate and do business. Because I didn't think about the standard settings that international wires are on and that type of thing. So it's really configuration setup of your account structure with your bank.
Yeah, cybersecurity listeners will say, wow, this sounds just like configuring a firewall or configuring MFA or, configuring my SIM. It's the same principle. It's just applied to non-technical stuff. And the great thing is now when we go in and we're consulting with a business owner, it's not all about technology and you need to buy this and you need to hire IT people to configure that. This is stuff that they do at their bank. And they get an appetite now for saying, I can take steps to eliminate cyber risk and reduce cyber risk. Now, the same principles for that person who doesn't understand MFA and things like that.
Yeah.
They understand what they just did at their bank. Now they say, okay, I need to turn on MFA with these certain configurations and controls. That makes sense to me because that's similar to what I did in my bank. So, in my view, and again, this is anecdotal and made up percentages, but it's illustrative. I think that at least 50% of cyber risk is about how you operate as a business.
Yeah.
And it's business operations. When IT directors are left on an island to say, Jeff, the CEO says, hey, IT guy, IT gal, you're going to keep all attackers out. That's an impossible task. Absolutely impossible, because if you leave your bank account wide open, that IT person has no control over that. So we need to help our IT counterparts by having the business folks operate in a safe manner with the finances and empower your IT people to apply the same principles to technology.
You said something when we first got to know each other, get ahead of the curve or something along those lines. Because incident response, you're responding, but if you can move what you do ahead of that instead of responding, get ahead of the curve is something you said. You want to dig into that just a little bit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of this is putting in protocols and procedures and configurations that will eliminate attacks from ever happening. But while you're going through that, you should be documenting and thinking through this. So that if and when your number ever does get called, right, you have a financial loss or you have a ransomware event, you know what you're going to do. It's the same kind of cyber risk prevention. Now we're into the cyber risk resilience component of there's only so much you can do to fight ransomware.
Right.
And in theory, at some point, there could be financial fraud. Thinking ahead of it obviously makes all of that much less painful.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, on a financial fraud incident, now, because I'm working with a bank or credit union I have a personal relationship with, I'm calling them on their cell phones immediately, and I already pulled the Secret Service regional field office that I'm going to get a hold of immediately. That's going to cut down your response time significantly. On the ransomware side, it's different procedures, but it's the same principle. Have your
Hmm.
plan ready to go, have your insurance policy, know who you're going to call, and know how you're going to operate as a business, because we've thought through this and we're going to be one of the people who recover in a matter of 1 day, 2 day, three
Yeah.
days, versus, there's a lot of people who are
Months.
months instead of
Yeah.
days.
So let's say something happens and they get to your money for whatever reason, but you realize it quickly. Like you said, you say, okay, I had to notify my bank right away within the first 48 hours. And you send up all the flares necessary. What are the, how, how difficult is it to recover the money, to get the money stationary and then to recover it? And how long is that? Or is there like a timeline that you can count on, or is it a variable type of account? It's got to be painful, I would think.
It is painful, and it's obviously case by case basis. But I'll say largely, in my experience, the Secret Service was fantastic to work with.
Hmm.
Um, the first thing they do is freeze the money, get the money frozen the first day or two. From
Hmm.
there, you obviously have to prove that this was done in error. You need to work with your bank. You might need legal representation.
Hmm.
You probably do actually need legal representation. I would advise grabbing legal representation at that point. Um, to prove that this was sent in error and get the money returned. That can happen in a the very shortest would be matter of days. Much more likely you're looking at weeks or
Hmm.
a month or two. Um, if you don't have a plan, don't know who you're calling, this is months, years, and maybe never getting the money back.
Well, yeah, that's existential in nature. What about working with the insurance companies? How do they handle this? Is it under their cyber policy, or is it some other different type of a policy?
They do largely. Sometimes they'll have these on separate policies, but
Hmm.
a lot of times it's on the same policy. Uh, because these claims are so significant, they will largely have what's called a sublimit, or
Hmm.
for financial fraud, they'll only pay out 100 or 250,000. So you have $1 million ransomware policy, but it only pays out 100,000
Yeah.
on wire fraud, business email compromises. So you need to plan, you need to think through, and you need to work with an insurance broker who understands
Hmm.
cyber risk and is going to help you. Um, but they are coming at it from a different direction, and it's fantastic. And here's how.
Hmm. Hmm.
So myself as the business owner, I'm going to take the initiative and I'm going to go get the money frozen
Hmm.
ASAP.
Hmm.
But I'm going to work with my cyber insurance provider to get their incident response resources spun up to
Yep.
investigate this business email compromise, find out if it's on my side, if it's on my vendor's side or my client's side,
Hmm.
find out where this came from, and get them the hell out of our network.
Yeah.
Right. So that's extremely useful too. I'm spending a lot of time today just talking about the money part, because I think that's often overlooked in cybersecurity discussions.
Sure
But
is.
the incident response portion and the forensic investigation to find where that snake was laying in the network, get
Yep.
them out so it doesn't
Yep.
happen again. Really, really important.
Yeah, because you said early on that there was somebody laying in wait for months until they saw that one invoice come through for 800 and some thousand, and that's when they pounced, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah, and that's very common. I don't know the latest industry terms, um, but the average business email compromise or financial fraud case at one point was over 6 months as average dwell time, where the attacker is sitting in your emails waiting for the right amount, or for the big dollar transaction, and to be able to pounce. So these people are sitting there a very, very long time and waiting to get you. Um, and And that just gives them way too many opportunities and gives them the opportunity to try multiple times where we have to be right every single time.
So for anyone who's listening to this right now, best thing to assume is somebody's laying in wait already. They've already penetrated you in some form or fashion, and they're just waiting to execute. So maybe get your house in order today, kind of a thing.
I would agree. I would anybody listening, any business owners or folks who own the network out there, ask your IT team, ask either your internal IT team, your MSP, or somebody else to go audit your email accounts right now and find any malicious logins. That's a good regular practice to do on a quarterly basis, I'd say. Depends on the organization, right? And none of this is individual legal advice. I should have said that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, making sure that your emails have not been compromised is very worthwhile because it can be done very efficiently.
Yeah. What other, if you had a couple other things to share with the audience, we always like to impart knowledge, but also a couple of to-do, action items you can do today. If you were to pick a couple things that you say, this is probably it's a high return on a little bit of effort.
Number one, if you've never had this conversation with your bank or credit union, go have it today. If you can't have it, find a different bank or credit union that is in your area and go have it with them. If you've never configured your bank account for wires and ACHs and thresholds. One other thing I like to set up that I failed to mention is alerts. So Jeff, the business owner, gets a text message every time there's money going out of his account. Gives you the maximum amount of time to then call and get that money reversed. So number one, figure out where you bank, find the right credit union or bank that will work with you on these things as a business owner. Number two, review your cyber insurance policy. If you don't have cyber insurance, get it. But these policies are all very different. So find a good, focused cyber insurance broker who will be able to bring you the right policies that fit your position. Not every policy is right for every business. So you really do need a cyber insurance specialist on that front. But my first two action items would be to go work with your bank or credit union or find one that will work with you on it and talk to a cyber insurance broker very soon to either review your existing policy or help you find an appropriate one.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, I'm so glad that we have met each other and that you are contributing to the SafeHouse Initiative. And thank you for today. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks to you and Alan and everyone else, the founding members of the SafeHouse Initiative. As you can tell, I think that it's badly needed. And I think that what you guys are doing to try to help people on this front, especially business owners like my dad who don't have all the technology resources, helping them safeguard their business is amazing. So thank you for what you do, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Have a great day.
You too.
I want to thank Matt Quamen for all his contributions to the SafeHouse Initiative, in particular, helping us understand how to protect against fraud, protect being one of the primary NIST controls. That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information on the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen. Send us an email at safehouseinitiative.org@gmail.com or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.